Welcome back to the 2-Minute Warning. Today I'm looking at the Los Angeles Chargers and taking a deeper look into the Chargers drafting cornerback Asante Samuel Jr. out of FSU in the second round at number 47 overall. But before getting to that topic, question for those of you viewing: who do you believe was a bigger steal for the Chargers so far in this draft? Was it Rashawns Slater falling to them at 13 and they didn't have to trade up in order to get him? Or was it Asante Samuel falling to them at 47 and they did not have to trade up to get him? Two great steals for the Chargers, but which was a bigger steal? Comment down below, Chargers fans and NFL fans in general. But getting into the topic and looking at this overall, I truly believe in the first two rounds the Chargers have won this draft. I just saw in the early third round they took a wide receiver, Josh Palmer, kind of a surprising pick in a sense, but just because of how much Tom Telesco and Brandon Staley have already executed this draft in Rashawns Slater and Asante Samuel, I have faith in them in choosing Josh Palmer. But looking at Asante Samuel and Asante Samuel Jr. more specifically, like I said, the Chargers have won the first two rounds of this draft, and the biggest reason they've won the first two rounds is because of patience. That's a very important trait. There's been rumors all around the NFL, around the Chargers, I would say, upcoming to the draft. The Chargers might not want to, trade the farm and trade up for a Penei Sewell and have to trade inside the top 7 or top 8 in order to, give up first rounders in order to get a top left tackle, but they might be willing to consider trading up to a number 10 or a number 11 spot, only giving up a third or fourth rounder in order to get Rashawns Slater in the first round. However, they were patient. They let the picks fall how they fall, and they got lucky, and Rashawns Slater fell in lap because they were patient, and they did not have to even trade up or give anything up in return. And the same thing goes for Asante Samuel Jr. There are rumors that Asante Samuel Jr. could have been a late first-round pick, and the Chargers, maybe they wanted to look into trading into the late first round or trading up in the early second round to acquire an Asante Samuel Jr., a cornerback at FSU. Instead, they waited and let the picks fall how they fall, and they got lucky and landed in their lap without having to give up any capital. Like I said, these are two big steals. Rashawns Slater, the second best O-lineman in this draft, just fell to the Chargers at 13. There was a lot of assumption that the Chargers were, I don't want to say going to settle, but pick a different lineman, a lower graded lineman, such as Christian Darrisaw or Elijah Vera Tucker, yet they got lucky and took the second best tackle, and same thing goes for Asante Samuel Jr. On some draft boards, Asante Samuel Jr. was a number 4 or number 5 corner in this draft, yet I believe he was taken as the number 7th or number 8th corner in the NFL draft. That just goes to show he was a steal for the Chargers, and this addresses their needs. Every draft year, there's a question to the GM and to the team: who do we take? Do we take the best player available, or do we take the position we need the most? And Chargers in the first two rounds with Slater and Asante Samuel were able to do both of that. The best player available at number 13 overall in the first round was Rashawns Slater. What did they need most? A guy that could fill the left tackle position. Once that was filled, come the second round, what did they need most? A cornerback in the secondary to help out a hopefully healthy Derwin James, an aging Chris Harris Jr., and an up-and-coming Michael Davis. And of course, the Brandon Staley head coach, he likes his guys in the secondary. They needed most a guy in the secondary, and who was the best available? Asante Samuel Jr. He didn't get picked up in the late first round, and he didn't get picked up super early in the second round, and he fell in the lap of the Chargers, and they took the most needed player and the best player available in the first two rounds. And like I said, they did take Josh Palmer, a receiver, in the third round. I'm not, against or for that pick. I'm just kind of neutral because I'm surprised, but I have faith in the Chargers, in Tom Telesco, and in Brandon Staley on why they are picking him. They might want to provide some depth at the receiving core. They might see something in him that we don't, and think possibly a receiving core with Josh Palmer, Mike Williams, and Keenan Allen can be very lethal. But looking at this team right now, Chargers have the potential to have a top 5 offensive line with a supposedly starting roster or starting O-line of Rashawns Slater, Oday Abushi, Corey Linsley, Matt Filer, and Brian Bulaga. And in the secondary, they, it's kind of bold, but I wouldn't be surprised if they could fight for a top 5 secondary as well. There's some great secondaries out there, but depending how these guys pan out, a healthy Derwin James, who's arguably the number 1 safety in the NFL when healthy. A Chris Harris Jr., who, like I said, is aging, but under a Brandon Staley defense might be able to bring out every little bit juice he has left, bring out every little bit of gas in the tank that he has left, and help this secondary out. Michael Davis, he's a pretty solid number 2 corner. And if Asante Samuel Jr. can fill the shoes of being the number 1 corner and being a playmaker for this secondary, even if it's not top 5, I do think this secondary could definitely be top 10, and the Chargers have just absolutely executed this draft so far up until this point. Like I said, Josh Palmer, it's not a bad move, and I don't think it's a great move. I just think we don't know enough about the insight of the Chargers and who they have on the draft board and who ranks where. We would like to think we know what we know, but we're not inside the GM room. We're not inside the room with the GM. We're not in the Chargers draft room. We don't know what they're talking about and what they're discussing. I believe they know what is best for the team, and that is drafting Josh Palmer in the 3rd round. I trust Tom Telesco, like I said, but patience. That's what the Chargers are doing. They didn't trade up. They didn't trade down. They let the picks fall how they fall, and that benefited them and worked out in their favor to the nth degree, and I cannot be happier for the Chargers. Like I said, I am a Bucs fan. At number 1 team, I'm a Bucs fan, but I am liking the Chargers more and more. I like what they're putting together. Justin Herbert, top 10 quarterback, already entering his 2nd year in the NFL. He's went from the worst offensive line according to PFF in 2020 to now possibly top 5 or top 10 offensive line. A healthy Keenan Allen, a healthy Mike Williams to go up and get it, guys. This receiving core is going to be dangerous. A healthy Austin Eckler, that's going to be dangerous. And then the defense in the secondary, Asante Samuel Jr. at possibly cornerback number 1. And if there's any guy to overcome his size, that was the biggest reason Asante Samuel Jr. might have dropped, because of his size. He's not the biggest corner. He's only 5'10". But if there's any guy to maximize his talent, it's going to be Brandon Staley, the new head coach of this Chargers team. So Asante Samuel Jr., healthy Derwin James, Chris Harris Jr., and Michael Davis. And we're not done yet. The draft is still going. Chargers still have another 3rd round pick. Things are going to get more exciting. The only thing left is possibly another cornerback or another guy in the secondary, and of course, someone up front to help out Joey Bosa. I like Joey Bosa, and he could take on the double teams, but you don't want him taking on the double teams forever. Either Brandon Staley needs to revamp Jerry Tillery. He used to be a former 1st round pick, turn things around and help him out and maybe get him to the place we thought he would be at. Kenneth Murray Jr., he'll hold his own in the linebacker position. Possibly we could see him rushing in, or the Chargers could explore the option of re-signing Melvin Ingram if he's still out there on the market on a cheap deal. Yes, on a cheap deal for Melvin Ingram. I'd like to see him back in LA with this Chargers team and Joey Bosa. But overall, complete steals for the Chargers in the 1st round and in the 2nd round. And Josh Palmer doesn't look like a steal on paper to me, but who knows? There's been 2 steals so far in Rashawns Slater and Asante Samuel. Who's to say Josh Palmer isn't one of them as well? Things are getting exciting, and this Chargers team is doing great. Draft boards all along, I think this would be the dream first 2 rounds for the Chargers in every aspect. The only way you could get better is if maybe you got Penei Sewell instead of Rashawns Slater. But even at that point, we're getting a little bit greedy. Realistically, this is the best draft board the Los Angeles Chargers could have asked for in the first 2 rounds. But of course, comment down below your guys' thoughts on Asante Samuel Jr., thoughts on Rashawns Slater, your thoughts on Josh Palmer, and of course, who is the bigger steal, Rashawns Slater or Asante Samuel Jr. For me, I'd have to go with Rashawns Slater, but they are neck and neck, and we're going to see in the season who turned out to be the bigger steal. But as always, thanks for watching, guys. 2-minute warning.